Welcome to Protect Organic, the final session of the 2022 Real Organic Symposium. After wrestling with the overwhelming problems in organic dairy for the past week, this week's session is intended to bring you solutions, inspire you to be active in your community, and join what Paul Hawken refers to as blessed unrest. We must actively engage to build a world that we envision, not the one that's been handed to us. We work really closely with real organic farmers across the country, and many of them have seen the footage and have wondered why in every session we don't continue to drive home the fact that they're still competing to survive in an organic marketplace that includes CAFOs, it includes hydroponic berries and produce. So please remember that real organic farmers are still struggling to survive to farm another year. If you haven't watched session 1 of our symposium last year, go to our website, watch it, spread the word, it's free, and when you shop, remember that these problems persist. Ask your grocery store about their sourcing. They're not going to know the answer, but if enough of their customers keep asking, they'll know that it matters. Today we'll be presenting a couple of really inspirational models from both Europe and Asia where the system is working for real organic farmers. Places where organic is becoming the only way that people farm because the people and the government are demanding it. Could you even imagine that happening in the US? The inertia of the chemical system seems so powerful and unchanging here. But these stories have opened my eyes to the fact that just because the world is one way now, it doesn't need to stay that way.
Second meeting of the beginning of IFOAM in '74 at that conference in Paris. And I had my own little organization, the Small Farm Research Association, and we were one of the early members of IFOAM. And I thought it was doing what needed to be done by bringing in ideas from all over the world, because the idea of farming with nature didn't just begin in America or England, but it was all over Europe and all over the world. There were Asian farmers who were just as much into it as people in the West. And that was a wonderful experience. And when the USDA wanted to do their study of organic farming, which came out in 1980, and in 1979, they called me up and they said, "We heard you know something about what's going on in Europe. Can you tell us?" And I said, "Well, better than tell you, I can set up a tour for your study team." That was just a spectacular opportunity because the USDA people had been investigating this. They'd been interviewing organic farmers around the US, and one of their team members had gone to Japan to see what was going on in Asia. But they had never encountered the quality of organic farming that they saw in Europe. And I tell a story. We were visiting this wonderful German farm. This guy was really good. We were talking to the farmer through the translator on the edge of the field. And one of the USDA people was an entomologist, the dean of entomology at a major Midwestern university. And he wandered out in the field as an entomologist would and was bending over and sweeping his hand above the crops to see what sort of pest problems there were, and finding none. And finally, we noticed that he'd stopped wandering and looking. He was just standing there in stunned silence. And we looked over at him and he turned to us and he said, "We can't do this well with pesticides." And I remember thinking that, he was never the same again. This was a miraculous thing for him to realize that the concepts that the organic farming people have been talking about, the idea that if you grew the plants correctly, they were more resistant to pests and disease, was actually true, and he was seeing it in action.
One of the things that is said in the U.S. Is that basically, in order to grow organic, we need to embrace multinational players. And those multinational players tend to bend the rules. And I don't care to grow organic that quickly if that's the price. But I'm just curious, in the EU where things are stricter, where the standards actually reflect traditional organic, is organic still growing in the marketplace at a steady rate?
Rapidly. If they do organic, they have to do it right. Here, my observation is they do it right. Like I'm engaged and very close to the second biggest retailer in Germany. That's a company that turns 70 billion a year. They had been for a long time the biggest organic seller in Germany, and they do it right. We buy from farmer organizations with their label, and their biggest partner, they have a 10-year, very successful, very fair, I must say, partnership with Naturland, which you're connected with. And that works very well, and it shows it's possible. And here they don't use big lobby power. We have not at all comparable to the US situation, lobby efforts, so to say, against us for own vested, purely financial interests. It's a very different situation. And because of this, we have the energy and the room free to grow and prosper.
I got involved because of the certification of hydroponics, and I started talking to the people in the EU, and I said, you know, one of them was Marion Blum, who's on our board of advisors. Everybody I talked to in the Europe said, who do I talk to about greenhouses? And in the EU, they all said, talk to Marion. So I talked to her, and you know, they were being told by some people that in the US, nobody cared about hydroponic being called organic. It was fine. And I said, that's what we're being told about Europe.
No, I mean, let's get right straight to it. IFOM is very clear positioned. Hydroponics have no place in organic. And there's no higher authority than the IFOM World Organization. If they say no, it should be no. And it should be no everywhere in the world. And there can be no exemption to that ruling, which is so fundamental to the principles of organic, to the ecological principle of organic, that there should not be even a moment of time wasted to argue. The same is with the CAFO issue. Unthinkable, absolutely unthinkable, unimaginable, and highly dangerous if it picked up by media. So far, not yet. But if some smart journalist goes into this, it would harm the organic movement with world impact. That this is possible to be certified under the organic banner and logos.
So let me ask you about that. I mean, yes, I would like to talk about the strange strategy of the industrial organic in America, which is that we hope nobody notices, right? We hope that nobody writes a story about what's happening because it will be bad for organic. But of course, the truth will come out. And I'm curious, what happens to the rest of the world organic movement if the USDA organic starts to collapse? Because our standards that are being, I don't mean traditional organic standards in America, but I mean the standards that the National Organic Program, the USDA, is in fact enforcing are not world standards. They're very different. And what happens to organic in Europe and Asia as a brand, as something that people rally around if the US stumbles so badly? Will it impact the rest of the world?
I don't want to even think about, and I don't want to see that USDA stumbles and falls apart. If they don't listen, they deserve so. But I don't like even the idea of it, because it would be a drama and a catastrophe also for the US, because I've been engaged from the very beginning in setting up the EU regulation in the 90s, in the late 80s. We shaped it to 91 when the regulation came out. And it made a big difference that organic could grow, and that, I mean, worldwide, that we had a regulated market, a protected market. It's clearly defined. Every imaginable word that gives an impression of organic is in the law, so there can be no misuse. And they did the right thing. They based their regulation on the IFOM basic standards, which is the ownership of the movement. And it's shaped by the movement and by the experts, and very much by farmer experience and by science. But if that happens, the rest of the world will never, ever follow the USDA. There is no way that USDA could have its way to say, okay, you follow us and you allow CAFO like you do it with chicken or these incredible big dairy herds you have, which no way ever can have access to outside, which is fundamental again in all the regulations and all the standards in the rest of the world. So we would never follow you. So you would be isolated. You would completely lose your markets. As a matter of fact, if there's not soon a solution, I think it is an issue for the EU, as there's the equivalency agreement, which was signed at BioFach. I was present when your deputy minister, Kathleen Merrigan, signed the equivalency agreement. It's not equivalent. It's fundamentally not equivalent, at least on these two hotspots, which under normal circumstances already would have been a reason to cancel off the equivalency, or for the USDA to change, to play according to the international worldwide rules. And the EU is the measure stick. When it comes to regulation, I think everybody has understood in the world, if you are not in line, at least there can be changes, there can be differences. That's okay. We are a diverse movement. but not on the fundamentals. And the two hot points we discuss, these are fundamentals.
So one of the things that I've been following lately is the Farm to Fork initiative in the EU, which just got voted in by the European Parliament. It was a big deal. I was just amazed that they can pull this off. They've got the same industries we have, the same corporations, and they seem to keep passing pretty good stuff. Unfortunately, the response to that initiative from the USDA has been basically, over my dead body will I let this happen. So we're now in a serious fight, and it's a fight, I think for people reading about it in the paper, it seems like an obscure issue, how much of European agriculture is organic and whether they reduce pesticide use. Although they're talking about reducing it by 50%, and they're talking about taking organic up to 25%. But they're also talking about how this spreads around the world. So talk about the whole infrastructure. They're talking about, is Africa going to become a place that is chemical agriculture, that is chemical industrial agriculture, or is it going to have a different model of how food is grown? And some of that food, some of the fiber and all that comes to the EU, some of it comes to America. America has an issue where they go, this is our new market. The rest of the world for all of our equipment, for all our pesticides, for all our fertilizers. Do you have any thoughts about this battle and the USDA's position?
I think it's incredibly important. I think they're a very powerful force right now in this conversation, and I think we can't take the pressure off of our USDA to disallow them from saying, like, we're going to retaliate if you try to set a higher standard. This is a powerful lobby working on this, and I don't want to diminish the challenges of this battle. It's often said that the lobby related to food and agriculture is larger than the defense industry lobby. And most of us think about, it's the weapon systems where the real fights are. No, it's actually food systems, how we grow our food, the agriculture, the food processors. And of course, they have many economic reasons to not want to be held to a higher standard. And you're right, it has a huge impact on agriculture in the rest of the world. A little bit of a opportunity now, and it's a paradox too, but it is the increased interest of the world in climate change. The knowledge that, we have to act now. And unfortunately, that's getting, more clear by the day. Every severe weather, activity reminds us that we're in a very vulnerable position. It's getting worse by the day. And a growing understanding of the role that agriculture plays, or the positive benefits. If we were all organic farmers, the amount of carbon we'd sequester in the soil worldwide would go a long, long way to reducing the carbon in the atmosphere, or not. But I do think this opening conversation, which I'll fully admit, could be co-opted or greenwashed, but about, soil health, organic matter in the soil, different practices, does raise the level of awareness that we have to do things differently. And I think that takes a little bit of the steam out of trying to go against the EU's regulations, because some of this is based on their understanding that they have to act on climate change and that there's consumer demand to do that. And I think the consumer demand for products that are grown in a sustainable way related to climate change, not just public health or personal health, is growing all the time. That's just tricky because we don't want to let corporations say, oh, I did these two things, or big ag say that, and then get away with pretending it's environmentally friendly or climate change friendly or whatever the label becomes.
I'm curious, how consolidation has kind of happened throughout the food system. So I know you recently published some findings in collaboration with The Guardian on that supermarket consolidation, and I'm curious if you could talk about that study.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the corporations behind, manufacturing food for the grocery store and the supermarkets themselves do a really good job to make it seem like we have abundance, that we have choice, that we have variety. But what our study did is we looked at, how many players are there actually in this system? The top four grocery sellers, so this would include stores like Amazon and Costco as well, take in about 2 out of every 3 food dollars that we spend. So 2 out of every $3 that we spend at the grocery stores really goes to, 4 corporations. And we found that on average, the top 4 companies controlled about 60% of the market. And that's a problem. So when we talk about antitrust and we talk about corporate consolidation, anything above like 50 to 60% is problematic, right? That's not a competitive marketplace.
The companies that we sell to have essentially all been bought up by bigger multinational corporations. 3 of the companies that we've sold to are now owned by one Dutch multinational. And 2 of them have dropped us, or we have dropped them. Let's just say we agreed to part ways, but they wanted cheap tomatoes, and they had the muscle to get it, and they didn't seem to care that much what the customers wanted. That's what is confusing, but it's a culture clash, and really, these big companies don't want small organic producers delivering to them in little vans or trucks. When we pull into a supermarket warehouse in a van, it's kind of laughable. Everybody else is in a semi, and we're like this little van that pulls up to this big loading dock. So that's how the system is set up, and even the big corporations, the big supermarket chains are bought by bigger ones. So it's perfect. Whole Foods is bought by Amazon. Stop and Shop is bought by Ahold.
Why does it matter that there's only a few choices? Like, why does it matter that they're all owned by one company? Does that company then have a ton of power when it comes to policies? Is that kind of the point?
It has an impact on making it really difficult for new players to enter the market, right? So when you have that much power over the supermarket, it's really hard for a smaller player to come in, right? Because you can, decide if you're a big company and you have, your arms in many different baskets and you're producing lots of different things. And let's say another company wants to come compete with you with cereal. Well, you can sell your cereal at or below the cost of production for a little while, drive them out of business, and then go back to making more money like you were before.
But I definitely think developing local cooperatives to sell to our local customers is probably the way to go for the future. If we can have local aggregation centers and local food co-ops where you can be like, hey, like, or the people of the community can see like, oh, so-and-so from down the road grew these apples, and so-and-so grew these tomatoes, and the communities can feed each other and then export their surplus. But I think the main goal of any community should be to feed its people first, and keeping all that income within the community rather than exporting all of your food dollars to multinationals, I think is the way to go.
The town we live in has a perfectly wonderful food co-op, but I say if you go in there today and buy raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, tomatoes, they're all hydroponic. I don't want to make those people unhappy. So I say if you want to be sure of the quality of your organic food, buy it from a local neighboring farmer. And you have a 99.44% assurity that you're getting good food.
We put bumper stickers on our cars saying, support our organic farmers. And God knows our organic farmers need all the help they can get, especially the kind of farmers that the people who put those bumper stickers on their cars were thinking about. But it's a system. It's a system. It's not just the farmer. It's the retailer. It's the store where you get your food. Okay? It's the nice people in the cities who stand behind the tables at the farmers market selling the food, who live in the city, because the farmers aren't going to drive 4 and 5 hours to stand behind a table all day so they can drive home another 4 or 5 hours. They have someone in town who works for them at the farmers market. It's the distributors. It's the truck drivers. Okay? And all of those people work together very, very hard to bring us the food that we eat. And to me, I would love a bumper sticker that said, support your local food system.
I think the point is that you exclude the medium. It's not just that small is beautiful. I think we've proven ourselves very capable of creating luxury food economies, living inside of the rest of our food economy. We're pretty good at 1%. But if we wanted medium, small, and smallish medium to be able to occur, then we do maybe need to confront the big and the giant and the gargantuan who are, operating with profligacy.
It's a little bit about the agriculture in the middle.
because it's wonderful you've been able to kind of direct market and have a huge CSA. There are some barriers for everybody to be able to do that. So can we find a way into the grocery store where it is convenient for people, and people do want to just have a one-stop who are so busy. But a lot of times that shelf space isn't available for small farms. And I even was told at Natural Grocers that there was like a myth of the small farm to actually provide products. And I think the reality is, and you can share your opinion if you agree with this or not, but that a lot of times we're kind of pushed into the realm of direct marketing and maybe keep our farms small enough so that we don't depend on these really fickle wholesale markets that can just drop us at a dime or don't even give us access in the first place.
I'll tell you that our experience at Hardy Roots has been that if we were to sell to an aggregator, there used to be an aggregator just up the road here, specifically for certified organic products, and the price list, like what they would pay you per pound for lettuce mix or whatever it might be, was based on California prices, right? Like highly scaled operations, operating year round, right? We have a limited season here, which of course impacts our prices and the like. So that model, like that's not a model that we want to be a part of. That's not a model that helps us pay our workers a fair wage. That's not a model that supports us taking care of our land in the way that we want to.
Let's talk about grown by. We're kind of switching here from policy action to direct, like in my life, here's how I can create real change. Why did that happen for you to kind of make that switch towards policy and advocacy to here's something I can do myself and my community to help build the movement?
This was informed by our own experience where we were selling our experience and other farms too, unfortunately, where we were selling CSA shares with this one software platform, and then that, I guess, it wasn't a very profitable sort of line of business for that company, and so then they became an aggregator, and we're actually selling like aggregated CSA shares right next to us as we were selling like direct CSA shares, and so became our competitor while we were also doing business with them, which was really weird. There was another company that was buying a lot of product from farmers around here. Everyone was really excited initially, and then they just and this actually happened again this summer, they just closed up shop without telling any of the farmers. The farmers had fields of produce ready to be delivered, feeling like they had really made a good deal for that season, and the company just said, see you later, this isn't working out for us, without giving any compensation to those farms at all. So if farmers need technology, right? Like we need to innovate. We need, as we were just talking about, like we need to make this direct model a fair model, whatever that may entail. If it's wholesale and direct, it has to be fair to the farmer. And I just don't believe that we are going to get that outcome unless farmers are owners of the technology company, because we are the only ones who can guarantee that there will be that long-term, transparent and fair relationship that is really necessary for a farm to take the risk of putting all of your products, on one platform or another, and keeping track of your data over time and making sure that that company is really working in your long-term interests.
What does organic even mean? It's being redefined. And it's being redefined by those corporations and their lobbyists, not by us, not by the Vermont organic farmers, not by the founders. It's being changed by big corporations, and they kind of roll their eyes at us, at small farmers. They think it's kind of a joke. It's sort of like, step aside, the grown-ups are here now, children.
I was at a meeting of the Seaweed Council and in Maine, and we were eating our haddock burgers, and we were talking about our festival and our fair, and some angry lawyers came huffing and puffing to join the meeting. They had driven all the way from Connecticut, and they immediately started speaking in loud voices about the lawsuit that they had put in against a nonprofit that was organized to support seaweed farming in Maine, and there was a lawsuit that was funded by a Google-backed venture company out of California, sending their Connecticut lawyers to our little meeting in Maine to try and basically control the supply chain for seaweed out of Maine. And, and I was there in this meeting, and I was the only aquaculturist at the meeting, in that particular meeting. And it was my first season. And I just thought, gosh, here you have these guys from California and Connecticut coming in trying to control a supply chain of something that doesn't even really hardly exist yet. We can barely defend ourselves from this, and we're outgunned. So we better start building some cultural power and some shared vision about what we want to have happen in our waters and what we want to have happen with our seaweed economy if we want to make it a place of opportunity and prosperity and protagonism for young people. So the price per pound of the seaweed that's harvested in the Philippines and the seaweed that's harvested off the east coast of Africa and the seaweed that's harvested in the South Pacific, 25 cents per kilo dried to go into a global supply chain, to be processed into alginates and agar and carrageenan to go into food industry. I mean, we know very well that seaweed farming is not profitable for the small, marginalized coastal peoples whose fish have all been removed and who are left with, growing monocultures of gracilaria in their warming waters. So here we have the opportunity in Maine with our cold waters that are also warming to say, we'd like to get a viable price for this product. And we don't need to decide in the very, very, very beginning to just hand it over for bioplastics or bioethanol or fish, industrial fish food. We could build something looks a little bit more like a CSA, that looks a little more like cilantro, that looks like something with a price per pound that makes it worth getting out there. And already, you had people a couple years ago selling fresh kelp at farmers markets in Stonington for $9 per wet pound. The price that's being paid now in Maine by, some of the processors is 50 cents a pound. The price that the consumer pays for frozen wild blueberries is more like $8 a pound. The price as a producer of wild blueberries is 25 cents a pound. That is the problem. So if we want to operate inside a viable economy for a reasonably sized and scaled, where the operating system isn't degrading the earth, well, then we need to defend that. And I think that's what we're here to do.
You have people that hire lobbyists that come back here and tell you, they take a grain of truth and make it into a mountain, okay? And so oftentimes, I don't think people do this intentionally back here, but they just don't know the whole story. And look, if you're involved in production agriculture, if you're an organic producer out there, you don't have time to run back here to Washington, D.C. and tell these folks and educate them on what needs to be happening. It's really up to us to do that. I try to do as much of that as I can here amongst my fellow senators. But then you also have, you've got the big giant multinational businesses that are out here that they want it their way, man. That's a fact. They got no time for John Tester. They don't. And quite frankly, so they're going to do whatever they can do to make sure that marketplace, that they control 85% of the meat in this country, or the world, I should say. They like that because you control food, you control people.
I didn't realize how exciting farming was when I was young. I actually grew up on a farm, a dairy farm down in Pennsylvania, and farming sounded pretty boring to me. But it's very exciting now. And one of the things that's exciting is the deep impact it has on climate change, the deep impact it has on democracy. So what about democracy? You've written about big food and big ag and big meat and big processing and big stores, big retail.
Well, democracy is threatened by large concentrations of wealth. People knew this and understood this at the turn of the last century, and that's why they wrote the Sherman Antitrust Act and all the other antitrust legislations. They were written not to protect consumers from price fixing, although that's all we hear about anymore. They were written to protect the republic against concentrations of power, that it was totally understood that if corporations got so big, they could push the government around and distort everything. And, the word consumer doesn't appear in the Sherman Antitrust Act. It's about power, it's about politics. And those antitrust has been rewritten under neoliberalism. I mean, it really happens during the Reagan administration, where the Reagan Justice Department decided that they would redefine antitrust and set the bar for when you intervened. And they basically said it was fine. And this was Robert Bork. It was his theory. He came up with this in a book he wrote in the late 70s. And it was basically like corporations combining can lead to great efficiencies. And unless it harms the consumer, we're going to let it happen. So the test for whether a company has gotten too big or an industry is too concentrated is, are prices going up? And will a combination lead to higher prices? And if it didn't, fine. And this is a complete perversion of what these laws exist to defend against. They were equally concerned with producers, that producers got screwed. Farmers and ranchers and people making all sorts of products, if they only had one person to sell to, one company to sell to. And in the Midwest with ranchers, you have that. The big four have divided up, the Midwest and the West. So functionally, you only have, one company you can sell your cattle to. You're captive. And so certainly the chicken farmers, that's true because they're under contract. So you didn't have any competition at that end, but the system turned a blind eye to that, and it still has. That memo, it's just a memo too. This wasn't a change in law. It's just sitting there in the Justice Department, and a Biden appointee serious about antitrust can simply write a new memo, and can hope that they will. And it'll be driven as much by the tech industry, I think, if they do, as from food. But it's clear that the Biden administration has their eye on concentration in food.
It's, I think, a growing topic in Congress. I mean, I know there are members who are working on antitrust legislation relating to agriculture, and I think we're seeing the frustration with this at all levels. I think we're hearing it from farmers who aren't organic, just this antitrust, as you said, vertical integration, consolidation of the industry, giving more power to fewer players. And back to your sort of original point, we're all worried for the health of our democracy right now. And the gap between those people who own capital in this country and don't is as great as it's ever been. And so much of what we try to figure out today is, is our tax policy appropriate? Do many of these big corporations even pay any taxes? Which keeps them, very solvent because they don't have to worry about, paying in their fair share. So yeah, I think that is a very important part of this, and I think there's a lot of members of Congress who are really trying to focus on, okay, how do we move forward on this and get back to where we were supposed to be around regulating, how commerce works in our country.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to blame corporations, they're evil. Well, they're still made up of people. People still are making these decisions. The corporation isn't anything behind a curtain. It's people that are making these decisions, and they know what they're doing. You can't, there's no way to sugarcoat that.
The people who are making money now with the system that's in place, they're making billions and billions, Dave. And look at the influence they have in Washington. It doesn't even matter what party's in power, they're there. And they're influencing whoever is in a position of decision making to the point of it actually goes their way in most cases. Yeah. And that's just isn't control. They do not want to lose that control. They're happy with everything the way it is now. We've got the drug companies, big pharma on one side, making billions of dollars, pushing billions of pills because people are sick. We have the food, chemical food, industrial complex on the other side, pushing billions of dollars worth of chemicals so farmers can get more yields, which are contaminated and also not as nutritious and getting people sick, so they're playing into big pharma's hand. Now we have companies like Monsanto, they've been sold to Bayer, so we have some companies that own both ends of this money-making deal. And they're not even American anymore, for heaven's sakes.
As a culture, we're too obsessed with price. I mean, industrial agriculture does an amazing job of giving us cheap meat, Meat is something, beef or chicken, take chicken. I mean, this was luxury food, for most of history. And in America up until, World War II or the 50s, chicken was the expensive meat you had on Sundays. And it's astonishing how cheap it is. And so that's what a lot of people see, the blessings of industrial food. Now, you have to look behind the curtain to see how you produce a chicken that cheaply. and it's pretty horrible to all concerned. But I think what has sold Americans on industrial food is simply price.
Yeah.
Pile it high and sell it cheap. Incomes have fallen in America since the 70s, like in real dollars, right? All through as the labor movement fell apart, neoliberalism took over. We subsidized that decrease in income with cheaper and cheaper food. So cheap food is kind of locked in. It's keeping people alive as their incomes have fallen. So it's very hard to just turn and say, hey, this isn't you're not paying the real price of food. This is what a chicken should cost. That's kind of a non-starter as a conversation for a large slice of the American public. So fixing the food system means fixing everything.
I go to some places in California. I was in Mill Valley 2 days ago, and talk about a community that cares. And I walked into the Whole Foods, and the organic tomatoes were hydroponic tomatoes from Ontario, right. And it's the height of tomato season.
That's Ontario, Canada.
To Ontario, Canada.
Shipped to California.
That's right.
At the height of our season here.
Right.
The tragedy is that you can grow things in greenhouses and they can be cheaper. And fuel price will say, well, I can ship them to California at this cost. Now you've just taken a tomato, grown it in a pretty sterile environment. You can grow abundance there. That's great. It's a technology that uses no soil, so it has none of that biology underneath that plant that's supporting its very intrinsic nature of the micronutrients and all the proteins and amino acids that can be formed, from this healthy soil relationship. And that's shown that it's not the same food. And the price of fuel being what it is, well, you're going to put tomato producers out of business in California because they can't compete. Or Whole Foods is not discerning enough to say this is a hothouse tomato. It's not what we want to be selling in the peak of California's tomato season. And it's just like milk in New England. It costs more to produce milk there and to have cows there. And so it's a failure on so many levels. The people of New England should rise up and say, Dan, and we will not buy another ounce of your product unless you're buying it from our farmers up here. Yeah. Because they're the keepers of our landscape. And the Whole Food shopper should say, where are these tomatoes from? Are they grown in the ground? Are they grown regionally here? How many food miles are attached to these tomatoes? And Whole Foods should hang their head in shame by allowing that to be what enters their supply chain right now.
But you can make agriculture so it's minimally, so it's restorative. I mean, it can begin to restore the environment if you cover crops and you have integrated animal plant usage and so forth. You can't do that with a building. I mean, that's the point. You can't replace those effects of agriculture are all just totally missing from hydroponics and from cell-grown meat. They're in buildings. I mean, basically they're buildings, and around them is whatever is around them, but it isn't helped by them. It's like being a city, making a city. Building a barn is not making a farm.
And in the end, the consumers lose too, because they lose choice. There stops being a choice of. Do you remember those blueberries from Hugh Kent? That we sent you a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
Really good blueberries.
They were fantastic. We had a big box, and it's my wife's favorite fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
where were they coming from?
They came from Florida, so kind of first ones in the U.S. coming in. And he's got a beautiful, Hugh and Lisa have a beautiful 20-acre, beautiful farm. They've got all this land preserved kind of for wildlife. She's a biologist. And then in the middle of that, they've got this 20-acre, totally glistening green blueberry farm.
Wow.
And they just mow between the beds and blow the cuttings onto the beds, and that's the mulch and that's the fertility.
It was a conventional citrus grove before we transitioned to organic blueberries. The organic decision was easy for me. The word sustainable, we're kind of inured to it, I think, now, but it's a really meaningful word. If it's not sustainable, it doesn't mean that it's nothing or that it's neutral. It means it's unsustainable. If it's unsustainable, then ultimately it's destructive.
They're really struggling with staying in business, and it's because they can't get their product on the shelf, even though it tastes so good.
Yeah, they were really fantastic blueberries.
Yeah.
The supermarkets, dealing with the supermarkets.
Well, indeed. So he used to sell them to Whole Foods, and this year he was told he had to go and talk to Global.
Whole Foods Global.
Whole Foods Global, and that all berries had to go through Global now. For tomatoes, I could...
Sure tastes that way now at Whole Foods, I have to say. I've been like, so when we live in Cambridge, which is only for part of the year,
Yeah.
Whole Foods is the best produce that we can find once the farmers markets close. And their berries are horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, I come from California, so I'm a little spoiled, but yeah, they taste like Global berries.
Yeah. So for me, it's such a clear example of what we all lose when you have a monopoly that is making a deal and saying, we don't want the competition. We're going to give you berries every day of the year, which is wonderful. Right. And we're very good at making sure that we don't run out, which is, you know, a wonderful thing for an eater who really wants to put blueberries on their cereal. But they will be industrial blueberries. And if you happen to want the kind of blueberries that Hugh and Lisa grow, and they grow them at scale, and they're very good at it, you can't get them.
Well, and Global's going to say, sorry, not enough product for us to bother with. Right? Because they're looking for efficiencies. They don't want to have 20 contracts with 20 different blueberry growers. They just want a couple. I mean, there's so many problems with this concentration. And it does hurt the consumer eventually. The consumer has a stake in it. But it's not just about the consumer, it's about the citizen.
Yeah.
And it is a democracy issue. It's just not a price issue.
What was that quote about democracy? That it's like a muscle and you have to use it. So we all have to be involved and protect. We can't rest on our laurels and say, okay, we've got a great system now. We can, go get a video and a six-pack and sit back and say everything's going to be fine. We have to stay involved, and that takes effort. And that's just part of keeping good quality food on the table, and it's worth it. If we can. Not everybody has that freedom to have the time or energy or know-how. So, we have to lift each other up, I think.
Capitalistic tendencies tend to reduce integrity into patterns that are easily replicable and that people can make money on. And if the integrity does not meet or cannot be reduced to those patterns, they change the integrity so it can. So it's okay, so what? You sprayed Roundup there. It's not really out in the field, it's okay to call something that's not soil organic, that's grown in unsoil. So, I think that the more we compromise the term, the less the term means. And I think we're at a turning point in the history of the organic movement that we either put our foot down or we just step out of the way.
Not only are the only organic farmer in the Senate, you're the only farmer in the Senate.
That's correct.
It's
actively engaged, that's correct.
Amazing.
We still do the work.
That
keeps me sane.
And it's amazing that that's the case, that there's only one, because of course when the Senate started, probably the majority were farmers.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true, and look, it's the nature of the beast. We've consolidated in agriculture both from a production side and a market side. I don't think it's healthy. One of the other big advantages that I found in organics is if I didn't want to sell it to one company, there were other companies out there. Look, when we made the conversion, there were 3 grain elevator companies in Big Sandy, Montana. There are none now. They're all gone. And if you're going to have capitalism, you got to have competition. And I think there still is competition in organics. I think we need to be aware of it, because I think there are some big companies that like to do the same thing they do to conventional grain, and that's just control the marketplace and give the farmer a few peanuts while the rest of us, while they're making big bucks.
That the question of whether the invisible hand can guide us to the place we want to go.
Well, yeah, I mean, the invisible hand, this mythical hand, if it does exist, is taking us to extinction. So we have to step back and say, well, whose hand is that? It's like, that invisible hand actually is capital becoming an entity unto its own, and to protect itself, to grow, and at the expense of all other things. I mean, basically, we're destroying life and turning it into capital. That's what we're doing. That's the economy that we have. That's the economic system we have. That's what's rewarded. It's a I coined this term in '93, a take-make-way system, that's what it is. But the take is life, the take is life in all its manifest forms, whether it be culture or people or place or river or water or oceans or soil. I mean, you just keep going down that list, and every ecosystem in the world is being taken. And everything that lives and thrives within that ecosystem as well. And the relationships between different biomes and ecosystems is being taken. And so, I mean, this is degeneration, which is why I use the term regeneration, because we can see that road ends. That's what every headline, that's what the IPCC 6th assessment was saying. I mean, for scientists to use the word code red, I just can't believe it. Scientists are so cautious, so conservative, so, I mean, for the protective of their careers, and for 2,500 scientists to sign on to basically that this assessment is code red for the world, it's extraordinary, extraordinary. And even more extraordinary is that every country in the world signed on to it. First time any assessment was signed on to by every member of the UN FCC, the UN Framework on Climate Change.
We have to realize what really value is, and the way that you store up value, things that you grow, the things that you know. I think there's like 8 forms of capital, ideas, connections, family, what you can get out of the land. All of those things are all places where you can store up value. And I think that we need to kind of get back to those things. But it's not possible when you go through an educational system that tells you from the beginning, you need to start getting prepared to get a job.
Well, I certainly am reimagining education right now, as like school would be very different if you said, our old way of thinking is actually leading to our destruction. We need to find a new way of thinking.
Yeah, it's industrial education. It came out of the industrial age. I mean, Western education, and it's gone everywhere in the world. And
so I have a question about that. Industrial education, industrial agriculture. What does that word industrial mean to you?
It means raising productivity. It means raising productivity by using technology, basically, to increase output, to increase the amount of production that a human being could create. And so whether it's a carpenter with, his skill saw or whatever, or whether it's a factory, or whether, it's a robots, or whether now it's AI, all those things are about industrialization. Industrialization is really the mechanization of textiles was really the first industry in the world in the conventional sense. And then that was, I mean, the UK, Britain got wealthy for 2 reasons. One is industrialization and the dominance that they had in the world. The other was enslavement, and that's why to this day, I mean, you go to London and go, oh my gosh, Mayfair and all this sort of stuff. I mean, where did all that wealth come from? It came from increasing productivity of people, but not necessarily giving it back to them. I mean, the average textile worker in 1800, in the dark, satanic Hobbesian mills, of 19th century England, 1800, say, was making a penny an hour for 12-hour days, in 6 days, 6+ days a week, I think. And if the woman would make a halfpenny, and the children would make a quarter of a penny. And usually families had to all work, the children, husband and wife, in order to get by. In other words, they couldn't survive unless they all worked in the mill. Well, there wasn't much time to do much else if you're working 12 hours a day. And they were dangerous as well. And we know, because it was on a gold silver standard, that what a penny in 1800 is worth today in constant dollars. It's worth 35 cents. So they were getting 35 cents an hour in 1800. Today, if you look at the garment industry in Bangladesh, in countries all over the world and so forth, the average wage of a garment worker is 35 cents an hour. So in 221 years, there has been no change at all.
Well, productivity generally means more product for less people. So it generally means putting people out of business. So whenever you hear that productivity has increased in such and such an industry, it usually means they've automated, or some other way they've gotten rid of people. So it's, when you hear about in food, normally when they talk about agricultural productivity, they almost always mean per man hour, which is what most people do not realize. They're not thinking about that. So if they mean by productivity, they mean more per unit of water. They mean more per unit of what, sunshine? I mean, what, per unit of space, I guess. Yeah. So that's the assumption there, is that the problem is space. And I disagree with that assumption. I mean, there's lots of space out there that we could be using in a very positive way, right? We could be re-prairieing the prairie, and it would be capturing carbon.
I've seen firsthand the corporate greenwashing attempts of nodding and saying yes. I mean, I think most notably right now with the carbon credit schemes, where corporations are buying their right to continue to pollute by supposedly protecting or enhancing forests. But, when third-party investigators have looked, it's really dubious, the claims about how effective that is. And you see atmospheric CO2 continue to rise even in the face of these carbon purchasing schemes. And so I think we have to look really critically at anything that capitalism purports to put forth as a solution, because fundamentally capitalism is based on an extractive mentality that is about human beings' right to pillage and plunder and extract resources from the earth and extract labor from people of color. And I think we need a deeper questioning about what is going to underlie our economic system going forward if we want to solve this. It's not going to be little tweaks here and there and cap and trade. It's going to really have to be a deeper questioning about the wisdom of the holy grail of economic growth. It's going to be a questioning about the wisdom of the commodification of labor, about the wisdom of continually extracting our natural resources until they're gone is the way of being. So, I don't know if we as humanity are up for asking ourselves those deep questions, but I think we're going to need to if we hope to continue to survive on a livable planet. So.
Look at the insanity of saying economics is capital, which creates, C on the top. The bottom of the pyramid is L for labor and L for land, which are inert inputs. So the whole issue of return on investments, the whole issue of capital accumulation comes from this illusion of extraction, where you take what nature gives, you take what people create, and make it into the miracle creation of value by the robber. And we have reached exactly where we were in the 30s, where the rule of the robber barons had created such deep inequality in this country that a handful of people controlled the entire economy, led to the Great Depression. We have a handful of robber barons now.
When I talked with Vandana, she said that she was being challenged in India at one point as a foreign agent because she was having seminars about organic. Were you part of that madness?
Yeah. I'm part of the gang. Yeah, no, I work very closely with Vandana, and I've been various times on her farm, and of course she's dangerous. She's a dangerous woman for the establishment. She's a dangerous woman, probably the most hated woman by formerly Monsanto, now Bayer Monsanto, because she is so brilliant, so smart, so full of facts, and so powerful in her communication, in her charisma, but also in her writings, that, they have to fight her like hell. While we fight here for a paradigm shift in agriculture, we want changes, we want improvements, they do what we really need. We need a revolution. We need a agrarian revolution. And I mean a consequent one, with the ultimate goal, which she formulated, by the way, a few years ago, a vision of 100% organic, with a very strategic, important step, which is 100% pesticide free, because we may achieve this first and faster and can build on that to make the world organic. And it can be done. And you said, let's go to Asia. We go to India. We have done our very best to publicize and promote worldwide the fact that one Indian federal state, a small one in the Himalaya region, Sikkim, has been completely converted to 100% organic.
Hello and welcome to In Depth. I'm Tina Jha. India's first 100% organic state, Sikkim, has won the Oscar for Best Policies, conferred by the Food and Agriculture Organization for the world's best policies promoting agroecological and sustainable food systems. In 2003, Sikkim became the first state in India to officially announce adoption of organic farming to ensure long-term sustenance of soil fertility, protection of environment and ecology, healthy living, and decreasing the risk of health ailments. It also stopped imports of chemical fertilizers in the state, and since then, the cultivable land there is practically organic, and farmers of Sikkim are traditional users of organic manure. The Future Policy Award recognized the state's leadership and political will to lead by example.
They had farmer field schools, trainings, model farms, model villages, and enormous education program around to bring the farmers the knowledge and use also their already still existing knowledge. And I have seen probably the most happiest farmers, small farmers with 2 acres, 3 acres, making a decent income for the family. I saw young people going back from the cities to the farms of the parents because they saw that you can make a livelihood and you can have enough income and you can have a good life in the countryside, living in the countryside. So, and this Sikkim has set the stage that there is indeed an agricultural revolution happening in India. In the home state of Vandana, in Uttarakhand, in Dehradun, where she lives, that state has also made the decision, is on its way to become a 100% organic state. Now, we are not talking anymore about 70,000 farmers. We are talking about 1.8 million farmers and their families.
So tell me, it sounds like a comic book. A whole state is going 100% organic. Could you tell me how that happens? Because I've thought about it. I live in a very progressive state in Vermont, in America. Bernie Sanders, Patrick Leahy. You know, we're special. We are. We have the highest percentage of organic farmers of any state in the country. Nonetheless, to say, let's take Vermont 100% organic would be a very huge lift. So how do you do that? And I asked Vandana, I said, Vandana, I want to learn about this. She said, talk to Bernvard. Okay, here we are. How did that happen?
I spend a lot of thinking, how can we take the lessons learned from Sikkim? It's not a blueprint we can copy one-to-one, cut and paste. It wouldn't work because the situation is very different. I mean, your farm, also you are not a big landowner, is so different from, let's say, a farm in Sikkim. But nevertheless, we should have the goal and the vision and the courage to do so. And for that, yes, one is it needs the political, not only the political will, it needs the political support and it needs the political measurements. This also brings us to Denmark, which is more comparable for you. That's what's happening there. All 9 parties, except the fascists, have been all over the years and for decades absolutely supportive of organic farming and put the right regulations, made a state control system everybody trusts, made a fantastic system for gastronomy and the restaurants and public procurement. And so in terms of learning, what we can directly take, we can learn probably much more from Denmark than from Sikkim.
I think that the lesson in Denmark is that a really active work with organic policy delivers on a whole range of issues. That organic policy works, delivering cleaner drinking water, better chances for biodiversity, less pesticides in our food. So we just deliver on all these areas. And what we have politicians now that, they've been fighting with trying to reduce pesticides in the environment, but the main thing that is actually working is organics. And so that makes them want to do more. Then if organics works, we deliver more organic farmers. That's what we need. Then working with the cities, going out in those areas where their drinking water comes from or where nature needs to be protected. And then offering together with the cities, we've worked with 40% of the municipalities now, offering conversion checks to farmers targeted in the areas where the cities particularly need to protect their drinking water supplies. And that is actually, brings it even closer to home, because then for a consumer, they're reading about this in the paper. And it's not just a question of, in general, this is good for clean drinking water. It's actually the water that's coming out of the tap right there that's being protected by organic farmers. So it's like trying to bring it home really close to consumers, citizens and politicians, that organic policy really works.
But nevertheless, in Sikkim, the farmers understood. The farmers are still farmers. They're connected to the ground. They know what is at stake. They did not like to use chemicals if they had access to it or were supposed to use it. They helped to create the markets, yes? And they made one thing parallel. which was really revolutionary. They knew if we all our farmers are organic and we still have import of cheap conventional food, which they had and they need because they have so much tourism, and for such a small place, so many tourists come. The highest mountain of India is in Sikkim, one of the Himalaya mountains. If we allow this conventional cheap food in, it will be an unfair competition for our farmers. Our farmers will not get the price they need. So they banned the import of chemical food. It took us 50 years to get 2 million certified organic farmers in the world. And now we look at India, where in the course of a few years, by the 10 of millions, farmers will be organic farmers.
It was 60% organic in all public kitchens. We got that put in 2012 when there was a change of government. But it set so much momentum that we still have a lot of momentum in that whole area. And it's actually a really interesting case of showing the power that when you have both policy and you have a mobilization in the organic sector. Because on the policy side, we had the 60% goal, and even more importantly, we had a pool of funding to help the cities with their conversion processes and educating people in the kitchens to start making real food again. And then the third part was a new label based on our national label for, it's a label for organic cuisine, so it's used in restaurants, and also the public canteens and kitchens, where you have 30, 60, or 90% organic. And that's been a huge point of pride for people getting that. So we have thousands of restaurants and public kitchens that have this now. That's the political side. Then we mobilized in the organic sector and brought farmers, food companies, and the food service sector together, just like we did in retail, like filling those gaps and building products assortment. We did the same thing for food service, so that when the public kitchens started ordering, they had the products. So we had a guarantee of supply. Then we did organic schools for people, the frontline salespeople in the whole food service sector in the country. These were very conservative people. Many of them had never bought an organic product in their lives. These are the people who are selling organic products. And we brought them out on organic farms. Through the organic school, got their leadership to say they had to go, but then, they see what does this mean for nature and for water quality and for, animal welfare, and they're holding piglets and they're, running around digging up carrots. And these people became fantastic salespeople. So you have this kind of push-pull thing going again. And then the last part was actually the education in the public kitchens, where NGOs did this education process with people who had been through really just like in agriculture, the people out in the public kitchens, these were not high status jobs. And they had been through an industrialization process where they weren't really making food anymore. They were opening freezer bags and throwing stuff in ovens and so on, and the food quality was down. And they're in a totally different place now. And the trade unions that represent the people working in the kitchens are some of our closest allies, because there's this whole new pride and prestige in their work now. And because they're not only making much better food, healthier food, but by reducing meat, reducing waste, buying more in season, they've created this and buying organic, they've created this climate-friendly, healthier, organic food, and not just doing that at once, doing it in the same budget. So no increases in the amount of money they had, because they've saved money on meat, they've saved money by avoiding waste, and now they're making better, climate-friendly, and organic, and paying the organic premium with what they saved on meat and waste. And so it's like everybody's happy.
It's time to go to a 15-minute breakout session to discuss what it would take to replicate in the US what Denmark and Sikkim have done. The state of Vermont is actually pretty close to Denmark in terms of the percent of agricultural land that is certified organic. So it's possible here. But we really need ambitious goals to keep up with Denmark. And we need the will of the government behind us. So in this breakout session, what do you think is possible in your state? Could it even get to 10% organic? What would it take? Click on breakouts, share your videos, and we'll see you back on the stage in 15 minutes.
Hi everyone, my name's Ariel Pressman. I'm the Director of Certification here at Real Organic Project, and I'm just going to briefly show you how you can get into your breakout groups. So you'll see along the left-hand side here, we've got a number of buttons. Just click the one that says Breakout. When you do, you'll see a number of different groups show up, probably about 20. Very quick, you can see how many people are in the rooms by looking at the number right next to this eye symbol right here. There are a maximum of 8 people that will be able to speak in any given room. But if you want to go into a room that's already full, just so you can listen to what's happening, you can feel free to do that. But if a room is full, you can just exit out and go into one of the other rooms you have access to. So to access the discussion groups, you'll just simply click the icon for the room you want to go into. At that point, the program will prompt you to share your video and audio. So you just click Share Video and Audio. It's going to pop up with this screen, just asking if it can use your camera. Click Apply, and then just like that, you will be in the room. So if there were other people here, that's where I'd be seeing them right now. It works just like Zoom, and you can see here I am right on the screen. So just so you know, these rooms will be available for 15 minutes. We will send you a prompt when it's time to come back and click on the stage to continue watching the symposium. We will also leave these rooms open after the symposium is over if you want to go meet up with friends, talk to new people, and we'll also have the option of being able to do some networking using this networking tab right here, and also going into the expo area to see some of the folks that are supporting the Real Organic Project. So thank you so much, and I hope you have some great conversations. Bye.
From the beginning, when USDA first tried to include sewage sludge, irradiation, and GMOs into organics, we as a community had to be resolute in our determination to make organic standards mean something real.
I guess the North American and the European organic movement took somehow different terms to the regard that in Germany, for example, but also in other European countries, organic farmer associations had already worked on the development of organic standards, and they already had launched those standards, and they had private labels out there to certify products for organic when there was no national organic regulation or no European organic regulation as we have over here. And when the European Commission published the organic law for the European Union, the farmer associations in the different European countries continued with their work and continued to work on their standards to further develop them and to promote organic agriculture, to offer training for farmers and to build supply chains and build market cases for organic farmers. And this is what we do until today. So we are add-on labels, add-on certifiers, you could say.
I remember visiting in Europe when we first got started with the Real Organic Project, and we were looking at other add-on labels because they've been going on since the beginning of the European Union when they started defining organic. All the kind of separate certification agencies like we had here, they just kept keeping their own kind of add-on label in their forms of continuous improvement. And what was really big there when I visited a few years ago was this concept of fair, which in the US I don't think has really taken off. And what it meant in Europe was not necessarily fair pay to the workers, but also fair pay to the farmers and fair contracts and long-term contracts. And there was really an awareness from the eaters to support the businesses that were actually giving farmers fair contracts. I just feel like we have so far to go here in the US in terms of that awareness on the eaters' end and what farmers are going through in terms of getting fair contracts and fair prices for what they grow.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We have a lot to learn, and not surprisingly, we're a much younger and perhaps less evolved society as a whole. And I am always, whether we're talking about farm policy or cultural aspects, I think we sacrifice so much in the name of independence that we leave behind a lot of opportunity for community and mutual support on that altar. But man, that's a whole can of worms, huh?
We're asking for a fundamentally different production system at the farm level under organic. But then what are we doing? We're replicating the way the supply distribution system works. And we're replicating those contracting mechanisms, we're replicating the transactions. And we can't have companies saying, oh, I care about organic, and here, farmer, make sure you do the difference on the ground, but I'm not going to do anything in terms of changing the economics or the way we interact on the supply chain. Yeah, we got to change the whole system, and that's a really hard thing to think about. And so I think if we could change that system that brings resources in and out and makes farms more viable, because farms do so many good things for us as a society, right? It's not just about growing food. It's about taking care of a habitat. It's about clean water. It's about clean air. It's about providing jobs. It's about buying things in your small community because you're now an economic entity. And like for Doug and I, we've imported people from other places to live in this rural place now, right? So there's this nice circularity about it. And we have to figure out how we keep that, like a farm in a way is a beating heart to me of a community. And we need to keep those hearts alive. That's all kind of philosophical, but I think the vision's great, but we can't just ask the farm to change a production system. We have to change the system of support that's around that.
Only in our fair trade standard, we actually look at questions of fair price to the producer, reliable trading relationships. So does the buyer hop between suppliers and producers, or does he stick to his supplier, to his farmer that he's sourcing from? Does the buyer support the farmer in training and improving his farm or his production system? And Natural and Fair also, for example, requires the buyer to do some advocacy work and publicity work for the benefit of the organic farmers that he buys from.
Right, and that whole idea of certifying the retailer, that is missing here. And so when we talk about, requiring of the farmer, do you have, a fair marketplace? It's like, well, no, and I have absolutely no control over that. I wish I did. I wish I had a contract for my product for the 3 months that it might be available. But because, USD organic is the only option, there's actually really no differentiation, from my local, maybe soil-grown organic tomatoes versus a supplier from Mexico, a hydroponic supplier that can supply year-round at a cheap price. I can't get into the marketplace. And there's no oversight of the retailer or even the ability for the consumer to make a choice there. Right? Because maybe the consumer would prefer to buy my local product, but they don't even have access to it at the retail level.
On the one hand side, I think consumers have great power over shaping the system and demanding the product that they want. But the first organization or the first entity that creates demand from the farmer is his or her buyer. And in most cases, this is not the consumer. In most cases, this is a trader or the retailer who chooses to buy from this farm or from that farm. So if we can get the retailers and the buyers involved into our mission and educate them about the reality of farming and about what kind of farms we want for our future generations to exist, it is super powerful, I think. And the consumers, they would take it happily. But consumers, unfortunately, also often happily take the cheaper product if they can. So I think that retailers, traders, and buyers of agriculture products really need to be trained and educated about the huge role that they have and the power. And yeah, we need to get them involved. They need to be part of this.
With this conversation in mind, is there anything you'd like to say about what you hope are next steps, maybe next steps for the organic movement, maybe next steps for what you're doing?
Next steps for the organic movement. I mean, I think that I would really like to see the organic movement support the Indigenous land back movement, because I think that we'll solve a lot by getting more land under Indigenous control in this country. We'll solve a lot socially, we'll solve a lot ecologically, and we'll be able to build coalitions across communities that have historically ignored each other. So looking at land back, looking at reparations, looking at the generational cries of people who've been dispossessed of land who want to be back in stewardship and relationship, I think will benefit all of us and the earth. So that's something I'm hoping for. And even though it's hard, I'm not going to give up hope. Humanity has been through lots of cycles of challenge and have found our way forward. And I think that, this is a pretty grave time in terms of how far we've gone down the road of ecological destruction. But it's also a hopeful time in that this generation that's coming up is really taking a stand and saying, no more, no more. So I'm hopeful.
I've visited some farms and say, I just want to farm. I don't want to be political.
Yeah.
What is the importance of joining a movement?
You don't just farm. You farm within a structure that is oftentimes set or influenced by individuals that have no clue the experience of a small farmer day to day. We are so busy as farmers, and you know this well. And there's just very unique and specific needs that farms have. And it is just absolutely essential that we work together to pass legislation, to reform the USDA, to pass new bills at the state and local level to support the future of agriculture that we want to see, that is fair and just and supporting our planet. And no one farm can do that alone, right? They can tell their story, but it's a lot of work to get a bill passed, right? You need to have farmers in each and every community working together. So that is essential, and it's such a rewarding experience.
The idea that big agriculture and big fast food is indomitable and ever expanding and and inevitable is just not true with what you see with Generation Z and beyond. I live it every day with my 30 cooks. And it's true, it's a rarefied world, but it is amazing what they share with each other on social media. And the interest, the amount of young people that want to know where their food is coming from, what the story is, how it's grown, it has just exploded. So we need these people to grow up and have children. And once they become parents, this will be an X factor. So I'm actually pretty bullish on the future of food. That may set me apart because I don't know a lot of people who feel excited about the future. But if you hang out with enough young people, you start to see what's happening and what's coming. And in that sense, big food is history. It's done. It's old news, actually.
Diversity is health. It's the hallmark of health, that we need to have a lot of voices. We don't need one voice. We don't need to have one voice speaking to the USDA because that voice will ultimately always become corrupted. It's just how things work. So we need a lot of voices, and we need a lot of models of how to succeed from very small farms. But I'm not ready to give up supermarkets, to the forces of evil. I mean, I think that most people get their food in a supermarket, and until we develop alternatives, that's where they will. That's where my kids go get their food. I want them to have the choice of good food.
And I think like the larger movement, the Real Organic Project, is, I guess, a response, right, to organic being a label that no longer met the expectations and practices, the high standard of practices that farmers were putting in place. I mean, obviously soil being the number one thing. And so until that is something that may be recognized by, in a federal law or label like organic, it's really important, I think, for the consumer and for lawmakers in the future to see that there is this movement of farmers that is doing things differently and wants to stick by that and really, has a higher standard for production that's incorporating all of these other things.
I think we're always going to need some kind of a farmer-led check on the system, like the Real Organic Project. We may get an ideal president of the United States that would put in place an ideal Secretary of Agriculture who would, as Bernie Sanders said when he came to Iowa, he said, make sure we have the strongest organic standards that can be. And that would stand up and change the organic standards and make them what they should be, like we've been lobbying for. That may happen. It may not happen. But even if it does, that's only a short-term outlook because the next presidency could change it again. And so I think we're always going to need some kind of a farmer-led check on the organic standards. And I think that's going to be necessary. I didn't used to think that. I used to think that, well, we're going to achieve our goal and we're going to embarrass USDA, they're going to change, and then we'll be set. That's not going to happen because the industry is there all the time. They're in the back door of USDA hammering on them because it's about money. They're a $60 billion a year industry, and that's big money, and they want that money.
The leadership of the Real Organic Project is all farmers. We're a farmer-led movement, but absolutely we are embrace and are partners with and in coalition with the many nonprofits that have been working all these years for reform and integrity. So they needed us,
right?
And we need them. These are committed, dedicated, really bright people. They have lots of skills about things like how do you sue the government and things like that. But Real Organic Project, which still does work on reform, but that is not our mission. So that is a departure. Our mission is to create an alternative. And more than just to create an alternative label, it's to create a movement that isn't confused about who we are or what organic means. And we'll do our best to bring the government along with us, but we're not following the government. We hope the government will follow us.
Actually, in some ways, for our farm, it sort of strengthens our belief in grassroots organizing and grassroots activism and the need for all of us to remain really vigilant in how organic moves forward. And, supporting the Real Organic Project is one of those facets that just feels really important. I feel like in a lot of ways, it makes us strengthen just our community, our valley here. You know, when we first moved here, there were 3 organic farms in the valley, and now there's 48, I think, at last count.
You simply can't expect the movement to go in the right direction all the time. You can't stop thinking that you have to pay attention because your certifiers taking care of things, and they're the ones doing the political work. Certifiers can get it wrong, and maybe not direct the ship in the right way because they're enamored maybe with growing bigger, and they make compromises. This idea that we are at a point in time where we have to right the ship and that we have to educate and create a critical mass again of consumers and farmers, young farmers and older farmers, that understand that this movement, if it's going to have legs in the future and if it's going to support the kind of agriculture we want, really has to have a body of activists there.
As a certified organic old person, I am very aware of the tendency of old people to get just a little bit arrogant about their accomplishments. And I want to speak for the old people and say that we need to take responsibility both for what we have achieved and for what we have failed to achieve. It's not anybody else. It was us that achieved these things and failed to achieve. So to me, the hopeful sign is that there is a new generation of people in their 20s and 30s and 40s who are coming into this movement, who recognize both its successes and its failures, and are committed, in my opinion, to moving forward on the things that we were unable to achieve. And I feel that it's the responsibility of those of us who are the old people not to be arrogant, but to welcome this new generation, to encourage them and support them. And if they find anything of value in what we have to say, to teach them. Because I think that there will be another movement to build an alternative food system, to build a more just, a more humane, a more ecologically rational food system in the next generation.
I'm really excited about the future of farming. I think there's a lot of hope and a lot of market left for young new farmers. So I'm really anxious to be part of it. And if I can be a mentor someday, I'd be super psyched because I've had great mentors in my past, and I'd be happy to share what I've learned through the years.
There's hope yet. I mean, I think that, you know, consumers have huge capacity to learn and understand, you know, what's happening, and they appear to have a great appetite for it. Not all of them, but a large portion of them, you know, and the ones that don't, you know, there's hope for them yet. You know, they might come around and start caring somewhere about where their food comes from.
Let's be ambitious. Let's be visionary. Let's get back. We have very revolutionary roots. I mean, our pioneers, our forefathers in the movement, they have been outcasts. They have been called everything you can imagine. That spirit we need to conserve a little bit and maybe regenerate this revolutionary spirit, because we need an agrarian revolution to make the turnaround. It's time, biodiversity loss, climate, everything, the tipping points. It's not a question whether we want it. It's just a question, how do we do it? How do we do it? By shaping coalitions, uniting the movement, uniting and liaising with unions, with consumers foremost, with gastronomic sector, with all the people that have a stake in food, which is actually everybody. We all have a stake in food.
Everyone listening to this can and should find their local regenerative organic producers and commit to buying from them regularly. That gives them cash flow, it gives them confidence, it gives them the ability to buy equipment and hire people and lease or buy more land. You know, it sounds trite to vote with your fork or to buy local, but if a farmer knows that she has a couple of hundred people that are committed to her success because what she's doing is important to them, that completely changes the equation. Access to credit, access to markets, and access to land, all of those depend on customers.
Consumers can't just be consumers. They actually have to be active in creating the food system that they want to see there, which means more than just purchasing the product. It means being engaged and making sure that you're donating to the right kind of agriculture, that you're getting to know your farmers at the local farmers market and being concerned about their well-being. It's absolutely essential that we rebuild a movement that was successful.
Really, it's going to partly come down to consumers. If consumers really want a real product, they're going to have to demand it. So we're going to have sort of a double kind of a system going on with organic. We're going to have the milk on the shelf at the big box stores, and we're going to have available some locally produced, real organic dairy products. And people who want them are going to seek them out. And if enough people seek them out, then that can grow. And it's really no threat. The CAFOs are really no threat then, because people don't want that product. They want this product. And so that's what's going to really solve it, I think.
Where do we go from here? And I'm not asking you to describe world peace, in the next 10 years. I'm asking, what step do we take tomorrow? What step people listening to this, what can they do? What's the most useful thing they can do?
We are all about consumer education. We are all about providing science-based, appropriate, understandable, digestible, sometimes short, sometimes long information about these issues. And every time you educate one person and you can get them fired up, give them information that is unassailable so that they are never embarrassed by what they're saying, that is defensible and backed up by facts, they become an advocate. Now, that might be annoying people at Thanksgiving. Okay, that's still a plus. And it might be people who start following different accounts, feeling comfortable and confident and empowered to push back. And it's people who are hearing from that empowered person about what they should be buying and the downsides of organic for Aurora milk and the real downside of Simple Troop Kroger milk. Like, it's just conventional, man. It's a beautiful label. But that process of education, and then each person being an educator, you might go to a party or dinner party like I do, and people are like, oh, there he is. Don't ask him anything. But there are people who come up and say, I heard you say this. Can I ask you a question? And those are the golden moments, right? That's when you really got to pull back, pause, and say, where is this person coming from? What's the entry point? What do I have that will help them, not overwhelm them, but inform them and empower them? And every one of us, again, for free, has that ability. And actually asking people, please learn about this and be an evangelist for regenerative and organic ideals. That's what we need to do.
Do you think this has hope? Do you think that this is something that people will respond to?
I absolutely. I mean, all evidence is showing that, first of all, with the pandemic, people shifted more to local and organic. And local organic is real organic, because why would you try and cheat in your community, So, because the other stuff, just like GMO soy in the Amazon, is a hugely subsidized enterprise. Animal feed in factory farms is a hugely subsidized enterprise. All of this farming without soil is hugely subsidized. It cannot work on its own because there's nothing regenerative in it. There is absolutely nothing that recycles itself, Maybe water might move in a hydroponic farm, but there's no life being regenerated on its own as a self-organizing principle. So I feel, David, the next steps are going to be real organic and fake organic, real food and fake food, real knowledge and fake knowledge. And this, to me, will be the truth and the satyagraha. I use the word satyagraha very much in the Gandhian spirit, the force of truth. Food is where most lies have been told. Food and agriculture where most violence has been perpetrated. But good farming, real organic, can be the place where we bring non-violence back into the picture. And that non-violence then brings truth back into the picture. And for me, real organic is is farming with truth, for health, for life.
What would victory look like? I mean, if victory is a strong label with integrity, within the federal system or outside of the federal system? I mean, that's a huge question. I mean, I think that, we've all learned a lesson of, and people predicted this when organic certification came along. I mean, it was incredibly useful in some ways and did a lot, but it also created this vulnerability. And the NOSB was supposed to be what was going to be the bulwark, and that didn't work. And I think that, so I guess the question is, where does it happen? I mean, maybe there's a new label, but do you give up on organic? I mean, that's such a huge step. So much goodwill and has been built into that term. And maybe that's what real organic is about. I don't know. Creating a label outside of that uses organic, but are you allowed to? Don't they own the word now? Well, they own the word USDA certified organic, those words. But we actually do require USDA certification. Yeah. So we're an add-on label. Right. So we are not trying to take that down. We're trying to save it, actually. Then I do think there's a chance for that. I mean, I think, again, you get the story out about why you need that add-on, and you've damaged organic. But organic has been damaged. That's just the truth. So it's politically, it's a you have to thread this needle very carefully. You have to tell a story that organic has been undermined, yet can still be saved.
The Real Organic Project, it is straightforward language. It really, anybody who reads those words and pauses for half a second says, wait, so the other stuff that's not this isn't actually real organic? What does that mean, right? So it poses an excellent question.
Right. Or they look at something and say, oh, well, this is organic. Oh, but this is real organic.
Right.
I want the real organic.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's actually, it's not milquetoast. It's, it's definitely the language is standing up a bit without being obnoxious about it. But it's not mealy-mouthed language at all. It's pretty firm. And so I think I like that about it,
We were selling our product locally enough in the beginning that pretty much everybody who bought Side Hill Farm yogurt had come to the farm, knew us personally, maybe we knew them by name. And so we felt like that indicator, the certification offered, was not really necessary. People knew what we were doing. People could come and drop by and walk into the barn and see what was going on. But as we grew and started to sell farther and farther away, when we were selling into Boston markets, we realized that, people need something to be able to make a decision by. They need to be able to look at a product and say, oh, I'm going to choose this one because of something that is on the label. And so we finally decided, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to certify organic. We're going to write the big check and do the extra paperwork. And right at that time, when we decided that we're going to do this and we were full in, it was when those shipments of grain were coming from Turkey or someplace that started out in Turkey as not certified and then magically became certified when they arrived in the US. And the Washington Post started breaking some of the stories about the CAFO dairies around the same time. And all of a sudden we were like, we just decided to do this huge thing and we spent all this money. And people are going to think that organic is worthless. This just shot holes in the reputation of organic. Did we make this commitment, this financial and time commitment to this thing that we thought was really, in line with our values? And people are going to be like, organic.
Organic.
Yeah, right. It's worthless, And so we were kind of panicking, actually. And then I think I don't know whether it was an email or something on social media, but all of a sudden I saw something about the Real Organic Project, and I was like, this is what we're trying to do. This is the organic that we're talking about. We need something so people know that these are the values that we hold to. This is the kind of farming that we're doing. We're not just, sort of greenwashing organic. Like we're really organic. That's really what we're trying to do. Now we're starting to get feedback where people are like, oh, I saw the newsletter or I listened to the podcast and, I'm so excited to see this on your label. Like nobody else has this on their label. I'm going to support your product. And that feels really good that people are really getting it.
That finishes this year's Real Organic Symposium, Milk and Money. But it's not the end, it's just the beginning. As it's clear from watching this, we have so much to do. Real organic farmers are still being pushed out of business, pushed out of the marketplace. Eaters are still being deceived. The USDA is still failing to do its job. Democracy is still being undermined by the concentration of power. So we have a lot to do. We can do it. We must do it together. The Real Organic Project is attempting to reclaim the word organic. It's important. There are about 2 million organic farmers around the world. This is a big movement. We've come so far. We've made so much progress. And it's not over yet, not even close to being over. This will actually take generations. But if we don't act now, we might not have generations. So I hope you will join us, and together we can do this. People always ask, what can we do? What can I do? We all feel helpless when we are facing a system that is so obviously out of our control. And my first answer is, whatever it is, we will do it individually, but we also must work together. My answer has been to work on helping to create the Real Organic Project, and I hope that you will help to do that also. Join us. Become a real friend. Make a small donation. If you can, make a large donation. This is how we will succeed. Join the 850 farmers who are doing their best to build this bridge between how they farm and what people eat. My second answer to that is just ask. It starts simply. Just go to the store and ask them, where do these certified organic eggs come from? Do they come from a CAFO? Are they from a confinement operation? Where does this certified organic milk come from? Does it come from a CAFO? Where do these berries come from? These certified organic berries, were they grown hydroponically? And these tomatoes, were they grown hydroponically? These are important questions. Mostly the stores won't have the answers, but if enough of us ask, it's going to change the conversation. I have a new challenge for you this year, though, and that is just ask the brands. We talked a lot about brands in this symposium, about Horizon and Dannon and Organic Valley and Stonyfield. I ask you to go to our website and click on the Just Ask link, and you'll get the address there of these companies, and write them and ask them one thing. Ask them to please list all the sources of their certified organic milk, every farm. If they do that, then we'll have real transparency. Then we'll know which milk we want to buy and which milk we don't. I'd be a little surprised if they are willing to do this, but if enough of us ask, they will. And if enough of the brands do it, then we've completely changed what's being certified as organic. So we do have power to vote with our dollars, but we need to vote with our voices too. Don't stop with the brands. Just ask your congressperson, your senator, your governor. Just ask the USDA, why aren't you taking care of us? Why aren't you supporting this kind of agriculture? Finally, I would like to give thanks to many people who made this symposium possible and who made the Real Organic Project possible. I want to thank my co-director, Lindley Dixon, who worked very hard for the last 6 months bringing all this together and interviewing many of the people we talked to. I want to thank all the people who actually spoke in this symposium and who were interviewed. we didn't just interview you because you're articulate, we also interviewed you because you know what you're talking about. And by and large, you've done years of work to help us know what you're talking about too. I want to thank our team at the Real Organic Project. There's some hard-working, bright people, and they'll be out inspecting farms all summer and talking to farmers about what we do and why we do it. And I want to thank our many boards, and I want to thank the donors who made this possible, because it isn't for free. It costs money to put on something like this. It costs money to run our certification program, which is free to the farmers. We don't charge the farmers for anything. In order to keep doing that, we're asking you to support it. In Denmark, organic certification is free to all citizens, all farms. It's supported by the government's tax money that they raise from you. So our government's not doing that, so we ask you to do it directly. I want to especially make a call out to the Francis and Forrest Latner Foundation. They've been our biggest supporters since the day that we started. And we've come a long way together, and we couldn't have come that way this quickly without your support. So thank you. Final word is that this symposium is a trailhead, many trailheads. There are many trails that go out from here. Every one of the people that you got to hear speak has an hour interview that was filmed and will be released as both a podcast and on our YouTube channel. So please check them out. These are well worth listening to. One of the hardest things about putting on a symposium is cutting out all the amazing things that were said. Okay, so thank you very much. We look forward to working together. Bye-bye.